Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter and analyst for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. On today's episode, we're going to be talking through my Game 2 rewatch, my Game 3 adjustments, and I wanted to talk some Minnesota-Denver Game 3, but that game ended up being quite the dud. Minnesota dominated from start to finish, wire to wire, and has taken control of that series. And now we don't know with the status of Aaron Gordon, what that's going to look like in Game 4 moving forward. Jaden McDaniels trash talked the whole Nuggets roster, and he delivered on his end in Game 3. Nikola Jokic played maybe the worst game I've ever seen him play in the conversation for worst game of his career. So Denver is in trouble, I think, now down 2-1 with all the momentum decidedly on Minnesota's side, which I think is a nice segue into the Lakers-Rockets Game 2 rewatch and how momentum can shift in a series. And so going to go through some notes here and then talk through some Game 3 adjustments. For those who missed it earlier, I did do a quick reaction video to the news that Austin Reaves is now questionable for Game 3 and Kevin Durant is questionable for Game 3. So if you want to hear that, I'm sure I'll touch on it at some point in the Game 3 adjustments and in the Q&A. But if you want to hear my extended thoughts on that, go check out that video after the live. But before we get into the Game 2 rewatch, shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Quick one here from Danny. Is Laravia injured? He's dealing with a minor ankle sprain, but he was not on the injury report and he will be playing in Game 3. So he will be playing through the ankle injury. But shout out to the chat. All right, let's get into it. So Game 2 rewatch, I think the biggest thing to me in general that has stood out upon the two rewatches has just been the state of the Lakers defense and how connected that group is and how on a string they are, and just the intelligence of the Lakers defense of knowing when to send help, when to rotate over, and when to zone up the backside, and everybody is moving in sync on that end. And going into tonight's games, the Lakers had the fourth best defense in the playoffs, which to me, and you look at the top three, I think it's OKC, Orlando, and Detroit. All three really good defenses, all three physical defenses. Two of them are playing one another. But I mean, that's quite the company to be with, especially Detroit and OKC. They're ahead of San Antonio defensively. So just a really impressive defensive start for the Lakers. I think one of the smartest things they've done against both Şengün in the post and KD basically up top anytime he has the ball is sending that second defender when there is no immediate outlet. They have been careful to, I mean, they've mixed it up in terms of the different coverages they've thrown at KD in particular, but with Şengün, whether it's doubling from the baseline in the post or mid-post area, or KD, when there is no safety release valve there, they will send that guy. And they've mixed it up where sometimes it is switching and then KD thinks he's about to go against the switch and then they'll send the second guy over. Sometimes it is just a trap or a blitz with the two guys directly involved in the DHO or the ball screen action. But I think both mixing up the approach to the double has been important, but also they have certain triggers within their defense of if this guy is sliding down in terms of like the next closest receiver, then that guy's going to shift over and aggressively load up and potentially double. So I just think seeing the Lakers shape shift the way that they have defensively has been really encouraging and impressive. And I think a lot of what they've done through the first couple of games defensively is sustainable and is how they can approach the rest of the series. Now, the thing that they have to be careful with, and we saw some progress with Houston at various points in the first quarter, a little bit in the second half, in terms of attacking some of those coverages, is that they will, if the Lakers help one pass away, they will have that guy start to cut or flash. And there was a couple of nice high-low reads with Jabari Smith, either to Alperen Şengün or Amen Thompson, or Alperen Şengün to Amen Thompson. So I think this is something I talked about in the series preview, but I think they got to be careful when it's Şengün screening for KD and Şengün as the roller, Şengün as the short roll playmaker. That's when I think Houston can exploit LA's 4-on-3 dynamics defensively. When it's just about anybody else, they are not making the right read or making it quickly, unless it's Amen Thompson just straight line drive to the rim. But I think LA's done a really nice job in that cat and mouse game with them, where they, like the Rockets, it takes them an extra beat to process the floor and to process those 4-on-3 reads. Maybe that gets better throughout the course of the series in terms of pattern recognition. But I think what's happening right now is LA is that they are getting KD on his heels or Şengün on their his heels. Sometimes they'll try to pass out of that, but we've seen several turnovers out of those direct reads. But then if they try to find that outlet guy, what happens then is that the Lakers are able to recover and rotate back into the fray. So I think that has been a really fundamental part of LA's defensive success. Is it's like they show the first wave of defense and sort of shock the Rockets, get them on their back heels. Then they're able to rotate out of it, get back into matched up or whatever, if it's like a soft zone or just really shading over to one side. So I think Rockets, this was my big Rockets question going to the series. I've repeatedly said this now, like, can Houston play with an advantage? And so far they've made progress. I think game 2 was better than it felt in the moment upon my rewatch, but still they're not anywhere close to the level they need to be like there are offenses that the Lakers could not use this direct defense against. And JJ's talked about, JJ's done a 180 in terms of his defensive principles. Like, go back to last year. He said he regretted doubling Ant and showing Ant some of the similar reads that they're showing KD because Minnesota picked them apart. Houston's not been able to, and Houston doesn't have the passing, the basketball IQ, or the shooting to really make the Lakers pay. There are certain matchups. I think OKC being the team that the Lakers would play in round 2 if they advance, like that's a team that they got to be careful with because I think they have the collective IQ and passing and shooting to make them pay. So I don't know if they'd throw that same type of defense at Shea. I think they'd shade over a lot, but I don't know. You might throw in some random doubles, but you're not doubling him almost every time he touches the ball like they are with KD. In terms of other observations, I think DA, like offensively, was even worse than I remembered in terms of the finesse finishing and just having several point blank attempts that you had the attempt he gets blocked by Jabari Smith, a couple of layups that he just short armed. But defensively, it was even better than I remembered. And I already thought it was good, but I would say, just great one-on-one defense against Şengün. Those couple right-handed drives from Şengün and just DeAndre stonewalling him, just being big, leveraging his length. And Şengün is someone who does. Most of his post moves are trying to knock you off balance with his strength and his base. And DA is a big enough defender that's not really going to happen. And even if he is dislodged a little bit, he could stay big and keep his arms up and still affect Şengün. Now, I think Şengün is going to play better in Houston. I do think he's short on some hooks and stuff that I feel like he will make probably in home games compared to road games. But he's obviously been arguably the most disappointing player in the series up to this point. In terms of other things, I would say I still really do not like the non-LeBron group of Luke Kennard, Rui, Jake, Vando, and Jackson. In general, I don't like the Jake, Vando, Jackson combination. If you have LeBron in there, maybe I'm okay with it, but I just think like they're leaning more into defense in those units. And I guess against Houston's bench, unless Houston dramatically changes their rotation, which sounds like they might go to more Reed Shepherd, sounds like they might dust off DFS. They're now claiming that DFS was injured and that now he's eligible for game 3, even though he wasn't listed on the injury report and was listed as a DNP CD. So I don't really get that. But I just don't think there's enough playmaking and ball handling, and some of LA's worst stretches of this series so far offensively have been when LeBron has been off the floor, and that's predictable. But I think moving forward, Austin will help. If Austin returns, that balances out in terms of having two of LeBron, Austin, Luke, and Marcus. Like you need at least, I think, two of those four on the floor at all times. But to me, it should be LeBron on the floor at a minimum, or Luke and Marcus together. And to JJ's credit, I think it's mainly been that first quarter shift where he gives Marcus a break and it's Luke by himself. But and then he still keeps Rui out there. I just would like to see two of the guards together, plus either Rui or DA as that like third option in the lineup. And that to me, like if you're going Jake, Vando, and Jackson and you don't have LeBron out there, I think you're tilting it far too away from the offensive end, and your only chance of surviving those minutes are defensively, which I think they've held up okay, but I just think you need a little bit more offense with that group. That's partly why I thought they should stagger the starters from the beginning, but the starting group has been awesome. I think like they should stick with that for now, but I just think that they got to change some of those like banshee heavy bench only groups without LeBron. Another thing is that Houston is really daring Marcus and LeBron to make threes, and in both instances, so Marcus has the hot start. He hits 3 threes in the first quarter. LeBron hits 2 threes early in the second quarter. And I thought that kind of broke Houston's defense from the perspective of if Marcus doesn't make those 3 threes, or he misses, maybe he makes one of them, he missed one early, but so he goes 3 for 4. Let's say he goes 1 for 4. Then they will continue to go under, play off of him. And even then, Ahmed Thompson had a brutal mistake. It was like a late clock drop. Well, that was actually against Rui, but he also had another play where he helped off Marcus that just, I mean, they had some pretty bad defensive mistakes on the Houston side. But they're going to dare Marcus and LeBron to make threes, and I think little swing factor early in some of these games is going to be, can those guys make threes and keep the defense honest? Because if they don't, they will continue to dare them to shoot. But when they do, it warps how they defend them. And then I think I've boiled down the Rockets offense to this. The Rockets play offense like a team that has a 20-point lead and is just trying to run the clock down and preserve the lead. Like there are so many aimless possessions for the Rockets. And then they mixed in, like they had a couple nice ATO sets. They mixed in some horns and some stack and like sporadic. It was very random. But when they mixed those in, they had some nice results. And it just, as an objective observer, I'm watching the Rockets offense, and I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get what they're trying to do. I don't get why. It reminds me a much worse version of the Lakers freelance offense, but like earlier in the season when the Lakers would have some of those stretches where they weren't organized, they weren't running sets, they weren't running actions, and it would just be a lot of ISO and end up being like, are they making their shots tonight basically or not? That's what the Rockets are a much worse version of that version of offense, because they don't have the overall collective shot making and talent that the Lakers have from a scoring perspective outside of KD. But and Şengün, but he's more like interior. I'm more talking about like the perimeter guys. It's just they're just running side to side actions and not. It just doesn't look like they know what they're doing. That's been a consistent theme, but it really stood out again of they would have these random possessions where they were organized and they'd get a pretty good look. Sometimes they'd miss, sometimes they'd score, but like from a process perspective, it made sense. I just don't get why they inconsistently do it. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out. Then I think Marcus's penetration and passing has been huge. So Marcus right now is leading the team in drives per game with 11 drives per game. LeBron is second at 8 drives per game, and Luke is third at 6.5 drives per game. Then there's a major drop off to Rui at fourth at 2.5 drives per game. So those 3 main ball handlers are leading the offense in terms of paint touches and drives. And I think Marcus has really led the way in this regard. And because Amen will often give him a bit of a runway, play off of him a bit, try to force him to shoot threes, go under screens and whatnot, that is inviting Marcus to drive and actually meet that additional space with force, and he's doing a great job with that. He can be a little wild at times. He likes to mix in the flair with the passing and some of the forcing things in traffic that aren't there. I think he's got to be a little bit better with that. And I think he's been the primary culprit in both of those second quarter stretches where the Lakers offense just has fallen off the rails and they've had a bunch of turnovers. But I really like his aggression, and it's not just Marcus is wide open from three, he's cashing a bunch of threes, which he did in game two. It's also Marcus is getting downhill. I mean, that and one he had against Amen Thompson early in the game. Just a ton of smart plays from Marcus. Then I think one thing we saw in that third quarter was it's really difficult, and we saw it in the fourth quarter as well, but I thought that the turning point was the third. It's really difficult for Houston to guard the LeBron DA pick and roll with the spacing that the Lakers currently have in terms of Rui and Luke. Then when Marcus is hitting his threes and is a legitimate spacer, they spam that in the third quarter. And with Ayton rolling and rim running and putting pressure on the rim, LeBron with the threat of either driving or shooting the ball, and then three shooters spacing out, it's just really difficult. And we saw some easy baskets, and they're picking on Şengün in the pick and roll, which is part of this, where when you have a limited defensive big, you can attack him in that way. But I think a smart thing that the Lakers kept doing with the LeBron DA pick and roll in the middle of the floor was they'd have two guys spaced in the corner, one guy spaced on the wing, and then as the action is unfolding and DA is rolling and LeBron is starting to go downhill, the other three guys lift. So what that means is that they all start to shift gradually up in terms of their spacing on the floor. And what that does is it forces the defenders into a compromised position of, do we want to help off a Rui or a Luke in the corner? And it's a lot of ground to cover to make up from, you don't want to give those guys any breathing room. So you have to like go from the 3-point corner to the paint to try to take a charge against LeBron or prevent a lob to DA. And if you do that, that other guy better rotate over if there's a driving kick opportunity to that corner shooter. So I think that the Lakers really put Houston's starters in a tough spot with some of the actions they were going to in that third and also to a degree in the fourth. I think the biggest thing from the Houston side, and we saw some of this in game two, but I think they have to do a better job of it in game three and moving forward, is really just pushing the pace and attacking the Lakers before they are set. The Lakers half-court defense is locking up Houston's half-court defense. Like, there are going to be the breakdowns and the random possessions that Houston breaks through. And of course, there's the saving grace for them of just having Kevin Durant give him the ball. And if he's not getting double teamed, and if the Lakers are late or there's a breakdown there, he can pull up and hit a contested jumper, hit a three, whatever. But when they are pushing the pace and attacking the Lakers in transition, that's where I think they've had a lot of success. And that's where the athleticism disparity between these two teams really stands out, particularly with Amen Thompson. So I think if I'm Houston, the Lakers are putting the ball in the basket a lot relatively to, like, it's the first couple games have been low possession, but the Lakers are shooting the ball really well. So it's not, I think if you see LA have some regression from a shooting perspective and Houston actually be able to defensive rebound and kind of leverage their rebounding strength and create transition opportunities out of that, that's where you could see some of the margins tilt in Houston's direction even further. But that's really it. I think in the half court setting, they just don't have the requisite processing, passing, and just offensive talent to consistently score or score at a rate they need to against the Lakers defense. It's, can they force turnovers and can they get stops and create early offense opportunities out of that? And they've had some success with the turnovers, especially in those second quarters. They have not had as much success at consistently getting stops. And that's, I think, going to be a key thing for them in game three. And then final thing would just be, I was really impressed with LA's off-ball defense against Kevin Durant. That's another thing that I think Houston's going to have to try and figure out is KD is getting pushed farther and farther away progressively throughout the game. And whereas maybe he'd be catching the ball just inside, around the elbow or around the 3-point arc, the second half especially, he's catching the ball 35, 40 feet out. And what that does is it's a longer distance he has to travel to make his move. And that also gives that guy, that second defender, time to shade over, time to shift over, and then time to double. And that's where you see some of these like long telegraphed doubles from the Lakers. And KD just, again, they had some progress with some of the reads out of it, but they still got a ton of good looks that they just couldn't capitalize on. And maybe that changes in Houston, but it was a very effective strategy for the Lakers. And I think a big thing of this is Marcus, Rui, Jake, and Vando. Those have been the four primary guys on KD, all just being physical with him and armbarring him, holding him, pushing him around screens. Like, I mean, all the tricks of the trade defensively. And I think that physicality has been really encouraging from the Lakers side. So I think it's been a great strategy so far. We'll see if I'm Houston, the way I'm trying to counter is not have him catch the ball up that far and trying to get him in the post or at the elbow and trying to get him already baked inside the arc, because then it makes it a little bit tougher to send that double or there's some easier counters out of that. But if he's going to continue to catch the ball 35 feet out, the Lakers are going to continue to double. And I don't like Houston's odds of winning that game. Now, in terms of game 3 adjustments, the biggest adjustment of all could just be getting Austin Reaves back. And what I mean by this is we still don't know yet if Austin's actually going to play in game 3. I feel like game 4 would be more likely at this point, especially because if he plays game 3, they've got a game 2 days later. So now you're playing 2 games in 3 days immediately after a 3+ week absence, which is tough for most players. So I could see, he gets elevated to questionable. Maybe he's game time decision technically, but doesn't play game 3 and then plays game 4. But who knows? Maybe he does end up playing game 3. But with the way the Lakers have treated Austin with a couple of his returns, going back to, I think there's been 3 different times he's come off the bench. All of those times were coming off of injuries. So he had, I think there was a game early December, the game at some point right before Christmas. I think there was a Phoenix game, and then coming back from when he played in the Brooklyn game, and he came off the bench for a few games there. That's how the Lakers have approached it with him, is when he's on a minutes restriction, they prefer him in a bench role. So whether he's starting or coming off the bench, I think Austin just taking the Bronny minutes, taking some of the Vando and Jake minutes, and then taking a little bit from the starters and the starters not necessarily having to play as much. Even if, let's just say he's on like a 20-minute limit, you got a few minutes from Bronny, maybe collectively from the other 3 bench guys, 6 to 8 minutes, and then you get 10 minutes from the starters. You shave off 2 minutes from each player or something like that. Even 20 minutes of Austin, I think, would really go a long way in terms of balancing the offense and making sure that the non-LeBron minutes, you do have Austin and Marcus or Austin and Luke. Then even the LeBron minutes, you can go with some bench groups with LeBron and Austin, and their 2-man chemistry has been great through the years, and their plus, minus on-court net rating together has been great over these last few years. So I think it just gives the Lakers right now are all 5 starters are playing great, or I would say 4 of them are playing great. I thought DA wasn't as good in game 2, but was as good defensively, wasn't as good offensively. But like in general, we'll say good to great with the 5 starters. Jackson had a good game 2. Jake and Vando have been non-factors offensively. I think they've both been solid defensively and on the glass, especially more so in terms of like rebounding, or boxing out. Bronny, the 2 shifts have been somewhere between underwhelming and rough. So I think that's an easy swap of if you give Austin the 4 Bronny minutes, 3 Bronny minutes, whatever, then a little bit less from the bench, because the bench, I think, has been one of the few weak spots to start this series. That I just think it's a dramatic talent and skill and production increase. And I think it just helps LA. We could see, I think, LA's offense finally break through and be closer to 115, 120 consistently each night, and them fare better in the non-LeBron minutes. But in general, we don't know if Austin's playing game 3, if it's going to be game 4, game 5, whenever it is. I think there are 4 keys for the Lakers for the rest of this series. And these are relatively straightforward things, but turnovers, we've seen when the Lakers turn the ball over, particularly in those second quarters, but also at parts of the second half, that ignites Houston's offense. And the points off turnovers, transition offense, Houston is stuck in the mud in the half court. If the Lakers cannot turn the ball over, it also gives them more scoring opportunities, right? That's part of the margin game, the possession game here. But turnovers are death for the Lakers because it allows, it's one fewer opportunity offensively, and it also allows Houston to leverage their athleticism and transition game, which the Lakers have to keep much better in game 2 than game 1, but I think they could be even better than they were in game 2. They still had 15. You'd like to see that lower. Defensive rebounding, progress from game 1 to game 2, but between, across the first 2 games, they're allowing 19 offensive rebounds per game. Houston averaged 15 offensive rebounds per game in the season series. So they could be even better on the defensive glass. I think they've really missed Luka in this regard, but that's an area that the Lakers need to fare better in. And again, if you can just get it to 14 or 15 offensive rebounds per game rather than 19, small difference there, but it does add up. That's been a big advantage for Houston up to this point. Then transition on both sides of the ball. So for LA, they've had a lot of success when they've caused turnovers and been able to get out in their transition offense, but also conversely getting back. And they have had some stretches where I think about the Marcus play where it becomes a 2-on-1 and he blows up the play, right? And I think it's Şengün and Jabari Smith. So 2 guys much bigger than Marcus, and he meets Jabari Smith on the way up, and it's sort of like a block/strip. So LA's had some transition defense success as well, but that battleground of who can get the easier, like with how this series has been, and it's been so in the trenches, it's been such a rock fight that the Lakers have had stretches where they're hitting their threes. That gives them an advantage. They've had stretches where they're getting to the free throw line. That gives them an advantage. But if you can get easy baskets in transition and also stop Houston's easy baskets in transition, that I think tilts that, in LA's favor. And then I think just continuing with their coverages against KD and Şengün in terms of mixing up where the doubles are coming from, the timing of the doubles, and how they're rotating out of that, just swarming Şengün in the paint and forcing Houston to have to figure out, process their advantages and figure out the ways to exploit that. And so far, the Lakers have won that battle, not only in the 2 playoff games, but for 4 straight games against Houston. So they have to continue leading into that. And the Lakers are making it look easy, but that is not an easy style of defense to play. Everybody has to be on a string, locked in, connected. And I think the Lakers, they've done it so far for basically 4 games against the Rockets, but it doesn't, they have to keep at it, right? You can't take your foot off the gas. You can't get complacent. You have to keep up that intensity, that focus, that awareness in game 3 and beyond. Then, as I mentioned earlier, I think they got to be careful with sending 2 to KD when Şengün is the screener and the floor is space. There was a few times he was able to just take that role and attack down the heart of the defense and score. Or he had a couple where he missed, got the offensive rebound and had a putback there. So a lot of his scoring actually came out of either him attacking as the short roller or him with offensive rebounds or along the baseline. So I think the Lakers got to be sharper there, especially if the 2 biggest guys, if it's Rui and DA coming out, or I guess Rui or LeBron and DA, LeBron and Rui, now all of a sudden you're smaller on the backside. So you just got to be careful there but with some of those rotations. As I also mentioned, one of the counters that the Lakers can do to that is you just switch it, and instead of sending the closest guy there, you then shift someone else over to make the double, and then you rotate out of that. I think Lakers got to be careful in those second quarter stretches. It was late second, early third, too many turnovers. Got to be careful dribbling into traffic and having multiple Rockets behind you. They've had the ball poked away 4 or 5 times, just dribbling past multiple Rockets, and those guys just rear view, tracking and poking the ball loose. So that they got to be careful with that. Also, Marcus has to be better with the lobs and dump off passes, just getting a little too cute with it. Continue to think Marcus plus Luke plus 1 of Rui or DA in the non-LeBron minutes. Then I think leading into LeBron more in the post right now, LeBron is leading the playoffs in post touches. He's had 8 post-ups per game through the first 2 games. He's shooting 50% on those. He's been fouled twice and gone to the free throw line, made 3 of 4 at the free throw line, and only 1 assist. It feels like LeBron has, I mean, this is NBA.com tracking, so it's not perfect, but it feels like he has more than 1 assist out of the post. But in terms of an offensive, he's been very efficient. If you look at, 10 points on 8, post ups per game, like it's pretty good. Then I would say lean more into Luke as a ball handler when Amen isn't guarding him. So with Amen defending him, he had a couple of those turnovers where he has the 8-second violation, he has the backcourt violation. But so that's like Amen Thompson, one of the best pressure defenders in the league. If it's Aaron Holiday, if it's Josh Okogie, if it's anybody else, maybe not Tari Eason, but I think if it's one of those other 2 guys, I think the Lakers should lean more into Luke. And that's the beauty of Luke, is that he is a hybrid player in terms of he can play on or off the ball. The Lakers are more leaned into his off-ball strengths so far in the series, with Marcus and LeBron being more of the primary ball handlers. But I think you can go to Luke when it's not Amen Thompson on him. And then, again, I think Austin coming in will help strengthen the rotation, cut some of the fat and some of the just bench heavy offensively challenged lineups. And as long as he looks, I would assume if he's returning, he looks, 80% of himself at least. As long as he's at that level, I think he can be useful. And then I would assume for now the Lakers bring him off the bench and he's on some sort of minutes restriction. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. See, we got a few super chats. First one from Easy Peasy 97. Thank you for the super chat. Once Suns are swept, do you think they would budge on Brooks? He would be great for this team and has more offensively than most of the other options. It's an interesting question. I want to say no because, I think everybody has a price. So I'm not saying Dillon Brooks is untouchable. I think if the Lakers made a very competitive offer for him, they could potentially land him. So I think he is a guy that, but I think you're talking about probably like 2 first-round picks. I don't think you're getting Dillon Brooks for a first. He was basically a 20-point 3-and-D guy this year and was the heart and soul of that. Like, he embodied a lot of Phoenix's best qualities, and that toughness, that grittiness, that physicality, and their defensive motor. He was at the center of all that. And so I think he, like, love him or hate him, and obviously he's a very polarizing, divisive player, and I think he takes it a little too far sometimes. He is a culture setter. He is a tone setter, and we saw that in Memphis. We saw that in Houston. I think Houston has missed him this series, and we're seeing it in Phoenix. So I think for Phoenix to have underachieved the way they had the last few seasons and have just really unenjoyable teams, expensive teams that underperformed, I think, like, all things considered, this has been a successful season for them. Most people did not even have them in the play-in. Most people had them as a lottery team. So for them to earn the 8 seed, and I think they'll be swept or maybe win 1 game in Phoenix. Even so, it's like, it's been a solid season that they could. Now, with where Booker's at in his career and some of the other prominent guys in the rotation, they are a little bit older than you would think. Like, they kind of have this upstart young team feel, and they do have some young guys, but it is more of a lot of their guys are kind of in their prime or even in some cases kind of exiting their prime. So that'll be something interesting to see. But I think they're more of like a win now situation. Now, can they really contend with the likes of OKC and San Antonio and the Lakers, et cetera? I don't think so, barring like a big move, but I feel they're more of like a team that I could see trying to make an aggressive addition this summer. They are financially limited a bit with their cap sheet, but I mean, if Dillon Brooks was available for a first, I would do it. 2 firsts to me seems like a more realistic price to actually entice them, and that's just that's very expensive, especially with the Lakers only having 3 tradable firsts. So I'm not saying I wouldn't do that necessarily, but I would. He would not be my top option. I'd be looking at other situations, especially if you can get like a Lou Dort or someone like that and not give up a couple picks because I just don't see a first round pick being enough. Like this is a situation to me where you would have to overpay for Dylan Brooks or overpay against the market. And I just don't think the Lakers are going to do that. So, maybe Phoenix has a pragmatic approach to the offseason and they say, hey, like, we're just not like, this is not a contender and we need to make some moves. But it does feel like they finally had a team that the fan base liked after the last few years. And they were like this feel good story of the season. And to just give up on that after a season for future picks, like at that point, it's almost like, are you trading Devin Booker at that point? Or are you tearing it down? Because if you're still in the Booker timeline, the Booker timeline's right now. It's you need to be trying to compete right now. So I think Brooks fits into that. If you're moving Brooks for picks, then unless you're packaging other stuff for another big move, you have to think about the Booker situation. And all indications are right now that they're not looking to move on from him. And so I would be pretty surprised if they trade Brooks. Jazz _ Singh. Thank you for the super chat. LeBron beat the Rockets. Then they traded their superstar Take for 3 years and then traded another star just for LeBron to beat them again. That LeBron has tortured several fan bases. We could go back to, LeBronto, right? And Cleveland. Toronto got the win tonight, but Cleveland looks to be in the driver's seat in that series. But you could go back Atlanta, Chicago, Boston. He's had several teams and franchises in the East that, Washington, that's like way back in the day. The Rockets are the latest. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Denver was down 2-1 to LAC and was also blown out in game 3 last year, not counting Denver out, but they are in trouble. If McDaniels was on LA, it'd be over. Yeah, McDaniels is just, he could have been a Laker. He was drafted by the Lakers. That's a tough trade. And you didn't know what he was going to become, but just the result of that trade was obviously tough. Denver has shown an ability to come back. I remember that 3-1 series comeback against the Clippers in 2020, but that was 6 years ago. I think Jokic and Murray have just looked gassed, and I don't know if it was the win streak partly leading to some of this of expending. Like we have seen sometimes teams that have to expend. I think it's happened to the Lakers, quite frankly, a couple of the last seasons. Like, part of the, not 2023, but I think 2024 and 2025, sometimes when you're going on this big run in the second half of the season and every game is like a playoff game for you in terms of you need to win and you're playing your hardest and you're playing heavy minutes, that can have a war of attrition effect on your team and on your best players. I think with the Lakers, we saw some of that the last couple of postseason series. And with Denver now, Jokic just played, I would say, the worst game I've ever seen him play. Jamal Murray started to make some shots in the second half, but he didn't have a good game. And they're also missing, I would argue, their third and fourth best players in Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson. And while they're a deeper team than they were last year, or maybe even the deepest team they've had in the Jokic era, they're not built to withstand absences to those two particular players. You could argue outside, like if Christian Brown's out, maybe you play a little bit more Spencer Jones, a little bit more Tim Hardaway, a little bit more Strother. Like you can kind of get away with that. More Bruce Brown. They can kind of replace like Cam Johnson or Christian Brown or some of their bench guys a little easier. You take out Gordon and Watson, they just don't have 6'8", 6'9" athletes. And that's what you need against Randall and Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels and that Minnesota team. So I think part of this is them being shorthanded with those two specific players. But Minnesota, it also makes me wonder, like the alternate with this version of Minnesota, which they're clearly playing better than they were to close the season. Like they were in a bit of a malaise. It would have been a really interesting first round series if Luka and Austin don't go down. And I think the Lakers go 4-1 over their final 5 games. They still lose the OKC game. They were just going to, they were losing that game with those two guys, right? So that game was over, but I think they would have beaten Dallas. They would have ended the season on a 4-game win streak, and they would have been the 3 seed, and they would have played Minnesota. And that would have been a fascinating series because I think the version of Minnesota we saw in the regular season, I think I said I would have picked the Lakers in like 6. This version of Minnesota, that might be a 7-game series, and I'd still probably favor the Lakers by a little bit with Luka and Austin, but I mean, Minnesota they look almost exactly like they did last year. That team, kicked the Lakers' butts. So would have been a really interesting 3-6 matchup. Mac Roblox 94, thank you for the super chat. Could the Phoenix Suns beat OKC in the next 2 games? They'll have home court advantage, and Grayson Allen, Goodwin, and Mark Williams didn't play games 1 and 2. How would the Lakers do against OKC? Well, so the backdrop here is J-Dub is out now. He's week to week. He suffered a grade 1 hamstring strain. I think they could beat OKC once. I don't think they could beat OKC twice. But I mean, I don't know. I've like OKC was without J-Dub for 50 games this season, and they still won at off the top of my head, like a 60-game clip without J-Dub. I know it's a little different in the playoffs, but I would say he's among their like big 3. He's probably the most expendable just because Shea's by far their best player and their most important offensive player. And then Chet is their best interior defender and most important defensive player through that lens. So they can't really afford to lose either of those 2 guys. If you had to lose one of your big 3, I think you lose J-Dub, and then you're going to play more Wallace, more Caruso, more Mitchell. You're a little bit smaller, but Phoenix is actually kind of small on the perimeter as well, with the exception of Brooks. But if you're looking at, Booker is big for a shooting guard, but they don't have they're on the smaller side between Gillespie, Allen, Booker, Goodwin. That's a lot of it's like basically 6'6" and below. So I don't think they have necessarily like the post attack. I think one of the ways to attack OKC is through the post, through your size, through your power. Brooks can do that a little bit in the post, but it's just a lot of contested jumpers. So I think they could win a game, especially if they get healthy and right here at home. But OKC is pretty convincingly controlled both games, and they have blitzed the Suns with these runs where I think only OKC can kind of have the runs that they have where they blitz you on both sides of the ball. So maybe it goes 5. I mean, my prediction was a sweep. I'm sticking with my prediction, but at best, I think it's a 5-game series. In terms of how the Lakers would fare against OKC, it's really tough to predict without knowing. I mean, Austin theoretically would be back at that point, right? Seems like he's going to be back either game 3 or game 4, maybe game 5 at the latest. But let's just say, for argument's sake, like by game 4, he could have a couple games under his belt to get into a rhythm and then also get some break, somewhat of a break going into that series. Then we don't know about Luka and just what his status will be and his availability. I think my biggest fear with the Lakers against the Thunder, we've seen it a little bit in the Houston series, but for whatever reason, Houston has not decided to do this. But when they've tested just bringing up 2 examples, Amen Thompson draped against Luke Kennard, 8-second violation, backcourt violation, right? And we've seen with Marcus, they've sped him up at times and he'll drive into the lane kind of recklessly and potentially turn the ball over. And with LeBron, he's had some turnovers with their ball pressure. Their ball pressure and OKC's ball pressure are not in the same ballpark. It is entirely different. And we've seen the Lakers immediately get swallowed up by OKC in both of the games in OKC, to the point where, I mean, the one game, the last game, it was over 3 minutes in the game. It was 18-4, and it never got closer. The lead only ballooned from there. And then the other game, it was like, OKC got out to a lead, but it was still within striking distance. And then progressively by late in the second quarter, late in the first quarter, OKC started to break the game open. Early second quarter, it was broken open. And then similarly, they lost by 30 plus. So, I mean, it's tough to say, because if you have confidence in the Lakers against OKC, you're either basing that entirely in theoretical, like you're kind of wish casting optimism here, or you are looking at like last year, but a big part of their success last year against OKC was Luka and Luka dominating them. And LeBron also dominated them. And like, I think LeBron, with the way that he's playing, could be very successful. And I think that's probably their best entry point into OKC's defense right now. But I do have concerns. We saw Austin have the multiple turnovers in the first few minutes in that last OKC game in OKC. I don't think Luke Kennard and Marcus Smart are going to fare much better against their ball pressure. Or if they fare slightly better, like they're still both going to have a bunch of turnovers and not really be creating the same looks that they did against Houston. So I think Houston, to me, like there are some similarities between the two sides, but OKC's defense to me is in an entirely different class where, I mean, they're clearly the best defensive team in the league. It's not really close, and it's their superpower is something that the Lakers can't struggle with, which is handling ball pressure and running functional offense out of that. Now, I think I want to give the Lakers credit for the growth that they've shown throughout these last few weeks. And I also think JJ Redick with a runway for a game plan against OKC. And I would be shocked if they're not already like, I mean, they've got their scouts plotting things out, right? And there's someone who has the OKC matchup, and I'd be shocked if they're not already deep into how do we attack OKC. I just think one of the ways to do it is having a Luka-like player, like we saw him do it in Dallas against OKC. We saw him do it last year against OKC. He did not fare well against OKC this season in the two games. Struggled with turnovers and did not shoot the ball well. So I think it would be tough, if only because I think they would really, it would be like an anaconda or a viper constricting the Lakers offense. And they just have not, at least I think I have more confidence in them like winning or faring better in LA, but like in OKC, they've just been ran off the court like immediately. So in terms of how they would do against them, I think right now my current prediction would be OKC in 5, but there's so much leeway there depending on what Austin looks like, if Luka can return, what he looks like, how the Lakers hold up in this series, because they have to stay healthy. We're seeing it now across the league. It just takes a game, and Wemby gets a concussion. Aaron Gordon hurts his calf. Like you just never know what's going to happen. It's a war of attrition. So assuming the Lakers can stay healthy, Austin gets into a rhythm, and Luka comes back at some point early in the series. Maybe they could push it to 6, but I have a really tough time seeing LA winning, if only because I think their weaknesses directly align with OKC's strengths. And I don't want to overlook the season series. Like they got absolutely demolished both times in OKC. I don't think we could just dismiss that. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Assume J Will out for OKC. It may be worse for LA. OKC better record without him, and 15-0 when Kason starts in his place. LA won 3 of 16 quarters in regular season. Surprised it was even that high, to be completely honest. I'll say this is where I'll push back a little bit on some of the regular season stuff. Like I'm someone, I follow the numbers to a degree. I am an analytics user, supporter, believer, whatever. But sometimes I think we can overcomplicate things. And I refuse to believe that J Will, who was a consensus top 20, if not top 15 player leaving last season, I thought had several games that, where he outplayed Shea. I think he had a 40-point game in the finals. He was pretty good last year. And I know he's dealt with the injury stuff, the hamstring stuff this season, and he's not been quite the same player. But I actually thought this is a little bit of a tough break for OKC, where he was starting to look more like himself and really be a two-way force for them. And so I actually think he might be their best LeBron defender. Like Chet is too skinny for LeBron. J Will is kind of the guy who might have the best combination of like size and athleticism, length and strength. They don't have a great LeBron option, but J Will to me might be the closest. So I think they'd really miss him from that regard. But I think to your point, I think the larger point here is like, I think they're fine. I think they could lose J-Dub and still be an elite basketball team and still potentially be the best team in the league. And that's because they have got I've talked about their talent in depth, but I think the big thing is like they have guys slotted down who should be in bigger roles. Like Kason Wallace will be starting for a bunch of teams. Alex Caruso, maybe because they kind of have him on a load management program, maybe he wouldn't be starting, but he's a starting level defender. I mean, he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. AJ Mitchell, I think, would be like an all-star candidate at several other teams if he was starting and given the keys to an offense. So yeah, they have guys that could step in and replace Jay Will, and they have 50 games of experience with it. But yeah, I mean, the Lakers, we talked about it for those who saw the game one reaction and game two preview with Pete and Anthony. Talked about it with Pete. Like, there was not a single thing positively you could take away from either of the losses in OKC. Like, I think a key distinction here is, especially if you want to compare like Lakers Rockets to Lakers Thunder and be like, well, hey, everyone said the Lakers were underdogs against Houston, right? And look how they have fared. I think there's two key distinctions here. One, we had seen the Lakers succeed against Houston in the regular season. They won the season series 2-1, and they had those two games in Houston where they locked Houston up. They out-executed them in the fourth. They out-executed them in the clutch. And we had proof of concept. The concern was, can they still do those things without Luka and without Austin? Can the offense be at a certain level? Yes. I mean, they obviously have done those things. They have the 2-0 lead, but they've been able to maintain that defense and that blueprint and that approach to beating Houston, which allowed them to beat them in the regular season. And also, two, I think this is more subjective. Like I said, if Luka and Austin were healthy, I would have picked the Lakers in 5, and they might end up winning this series in 5 anyway. But like, I think the Lakers would have been favored against Houston if they had their full group of players. Like before Luka and Austin got injured, everyone was talking about how Houston was the team you wanted to play in the West, and that was the team everybody would be jockeying to play. Then Luka and Austin go down, and that shifts toward, well, now we want to play the Lakers. The difference here is the Lakers did not have success against OKC in the regular season. The only sliver of success you could say they had was that second game in LA with LeBron and Austin, but there was no Shea and AJ Mitchell on the OKC side and no Luka on the Lakers side. Now, maybe that Luka's not back and the Lakers could take that blueprint without him from that game and try to figure, playing through LeBron more. But no Shea and no AJ Mitchell are two giant losses. And part of Shea's MVP case was how much worse the Thunder were without him. It's still good record wise, but just like the on-off split. So I don't think it's fair. Like, I don't want to base any Lakers optimism on, well, they played well without Shea. Unless Shea's injured, that doesn't really apply. So then also, if they were even at full strength, the Lakers would be considered, I think, heavy underdogs, where it'd probably be a 5 or 6 game series with Luka and Austin at full strength. So those are the two differences, in my opinion, of like the Lakers had success against the Rockets in the regular season. They did not against OKC. And then looking at the matchup full strength, they would be favored against Houston. They would still be massive underdogs against OKC. Peter, thank you for the super chat. New York in bigger trouble than Denver, in my opinion. You might be onto something here. I didn't catch the full game. I did catch the end of the game and saw Jonathan Kuminga. How about that? Jonathan Kuminga with the smart double and then out hustling and beating Josh Hart to that loose ball to seal that game. And obviously CJ McCollum with I feel like he's becoming the new Sam Cassell, like kind of where Sam Cassell was in that early 2000s range, where just steady, big shot maker, big shot taker, like clutch dude, clutch veteran. So, I mean, he hits that big jumper. They went very quick. They went like 3 seconds. I mean, I get going early to get the offense rebound or if you have to foul, but they went super fast and ended up getting the stop anyway. I would say, I mean, the difference would be, in my opinion, that, or if you wanted to make like the counterpoint here, like at least New York, both of their losses came down to basically the final possession, and on one they missed the game-winning shot. On the other, they had well, I guess they technically missed the game, or whatever, turnover, loose ball situation. So, I mean, it came down to the final play in both instances. With Denver, they got absolutely demolished tonight. And I know that happened in 2024 against Minnesota, where both teams traded off some blowouts at home. But I think, I don't know. I think that the difference for me is like New York in theory has a talent advantage over Atlanta, right? It has not really materialized in the series, and we saw Mikal Bridges was not out there closing, but at least you could talk yourself into like New York having the best player in the series and also having a general talent advantage. Although New York with Jalen Johnson, CJ McCollum, Nas Steps, like they've made that more competitive. But if you're just going through the talent within the series, I still think New York has that advantage. With Denver, they're supposed to have the best player in the series. I think he was the best player through the first couple games, but after tonight, I mean, I don't even know who's been the best. Like, is it Julius Randle? Is it Rudy Gobert? Is it Ant? Like, Ant hasn't been fully 100%. It's kind of been like the collective with Minnesota. And then I also think the injury situation here of if Peyton Watson is not back soon, and if Aaron Gordon is out, if Aaron Gordon's out game 4, I think they're losing again. I think they need Aaron Gordon back. So I know they're saying he's day-to-day. Maybe he's back. But I think Denver's kind of in trouble because their 2 stars are underperforming, and they're also without their 3rd and 4th best player. And it's a pretty even matchup anyway. Like some of my pessimism from the Minnesota side was more so just I didn't think Ant was fully healthy, and he hasn't been, but it hasn't really mattered. They've been fine but without him. So I think both teams are kind of in trouble right now, but you might be right. It might be more, at least though with that Atlanta, New York, it's been close. With Denver, Minnesota closed that game really strong and just took it by the horns. And then game 2 and then game 3, just wire to wire ass kicking. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess if I have more confidence in one of the teams to make a comeback, I might lean Denver, but yeah, they're in a tough spot if they don't get healthy. Peter says Ayo DeSumo 3 years, $60 million is better than Austin 5 years, $205 million. Ayo DeSumo has been, I mean, the Lakers have one of the best. I mean, some of the guys we just talked about, CJ McCollum, Luke Kennard, Ayo DeSumo. I mean, those probably been the 3 most impactful trade deadline acquisitions, at least in a playoff context so far. CJ's dropping 20 plus, hitting big shots for Atlanta. Luke is doing what he's doing, averaging 25, shooting 72% on threes. And then Ayo is just transformed Minnesota's bench almost single-handedly or at least like the backcourt part of the bench, and done a lot of what Na did for them. But I think is a little bit more offensive minded than like the previous version of Na. Obviously Nas is grown in Atlanta. I mean, that's a pretty good value for Ayo, but yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, that is like Austin at about 41 a year versus Ayo 20 a year. Double Ayo. I mean, I think what this might actually be indicating is like Ayo's number might be a little bit too low. He might be somewhere in that 20 to 25 range. But I think, I mean, if you're just asking who the better player is, I think it's still very clearly Austin. Now, the number, I mean, we'll see. Like, he's got to get a chance to play the playoffs, and we'll see how he fares. I don't know how close to 100% he'll be, but if you're out there, you got to perform and you got to be held to a certain standard. But I still think Austin's contract is a value based on his production and value. Bubba and the old man, thank you for the super chat. Dort as a free agent or trade, what would it take? It's a really good question. So I think if it's up to OKC, they'd probably prefer to trade him. They could get something back in a trade, a swap, a pick, whatever. Whereas if it's in free agency, if you're OKC, you're just losing him for nothing, right? And you are saving the money, which is the benefit of getting off of the Dort contract because he has a team option. But I think it would be most beneficial for them to pick up his option and trade him. It's just a matter of like what because you also don't want to be taking a certain amount of money back, because part of the reason you are trading him is to get off the money and to clean your cap sheet. So if you're trading him for a like size player in terms of salary, doesn't really make sense. So I think the advantage for them would be getting like a young player on a cheap contract and or some sort of pick, draft capital, whatever. So I think that's going to be their preference. Now, with all that said, if I'm OKC, I would not trade him to the Lakers. Like the Lakers would have to overpay, in my opinion, if I'm OKC. Now, I don't know if that's how they're going to approach it, but if I'm OKC, I'm looking at my biggest threats over the next 2 years, and I think San Antonio is their biggest threat, but you can make a strong case for the Lakers as the second biggest threat over the next few years. So I would not want to give that team my starting wing/guard stopper. Like, I just think that would be a mistake on OKC's part. So I would either trade him elsewhere and hopefully get something back, or I let him become a free agent and be like, all right, Lakers, like, go spend your money on him and potentially have his price be driven up in free agency, and at least that maybe limits the Lakers to do other things. But I was originally looking at it from the OKC side of like, I think the best thing for OKC would be to trade him rather than just let him walk. But if we're looking at it from a Lakers perspective and what I think would be realistic, I think it's much more realistic to land him in free agency if OKC decides not to pick up his contract, because at that point, if they do pick up his contract, I think they're going to ask for the moon from the Lakers and not just, they could, they're also in a position where if they want to dump him somewhere else, they can attach something to dump him. So for example, Brooklyn and Chicago are going to have cap space. If they really just want to stick it to the Lakers and not only not trade him to the Lakers, but obviously not let him get to free agency, they could be like, all right, we're going to exercise the team option, and Brooklyn, here's like a top 15 protected pick. Chicago, here's a top 15 protected pick, whatever. And they take on that pick to take on the Dort contract and or something along those lines. They could trade a couple seconds, whatever it is, but they could attach an asset to Dort to a team with cap space that's not the Lakers, because they're not a competitor, or like the Lakers are a competitor, these other teams aren't, and try to manipulate it that way. So if I'm OKC, I'm doing everything I can to not let him get to the Lakers unless the Lakers want to make a very aggressive offer. But I think the best case from the Lakers perspective, I think, would be him becoming a free agent and then you just sign him that way. Rando. Thank you for the super chat. Tired of the AR slender Jovan. People think 50, 40, 90 guys grow on trees. Put them on any other team in the West and they become contenders. I mean, you know how I feel about Austin and what I think about Austin. I think he is worth that contract. I was more so just thinking about it from a value perspective of if you have IO at 20, that it's just additional 20 million to spend elsewhere depending on the construction of your roster. But I think it's very context based. But yeah, I mean, I think Austin is definitely worth the I've been saying I would pay him into the high 30s, and based on the average annual value, that would push him up around that $200 million mark. So I have no issue with that potential contract for him. I also think I've been thinking about, because people keep throwing out the Luke, and I don't even think, I think the whole like Luke versus Austin thing is like a very manufactured narrative of people trying to pit those two. They keep trying to pit Austin against different people, but I think the difference between, or what I would like to see, and we might get to see this now, and we'll see where Austin's at from just his physical capabilities. But Austin, people bringing up Austin's playoff track record, or like he's never scored more than 23 in a game. Austin has always been a third option, and a distant third option. Like last year, LeBron finished 6th in MVP and 6th in All-NBA, and Luka was Luka. Previously, LeBron and AD were both top 10 players. So this has been the first season where Austin would be in a position to have a larger role in the playoffs and go from, I think there's retroactive or revisionist history with, go back to 2023, like he had the coming out party in game 1 against Memphis, but they were still trading off between him and D'Lo being the third option. It wasn't like Austin was this clear-cut number 3. He grew into that throughout the course of the playoffs and was their most reliable third option in that Denver series. But it was not, it fluctuated game to game in terms of shot attempts and usage and whatnot. 2024, they had empowered Austin ahead of D'Lo. But remember, that was point D'Lo, and D'Lo still had the ball a lot. And he did not play well in the Denver series outside of game 2, but it still was like some of the usage splitting there. 2025, Austin emerges as the clear number 3 and was the number 2 at times in the season, but it was still funneling through Luka and LeBron, and Austin was more of a number 3 option. And then now Austin has was more of the number 2 before he went down, but I think that kind of fluctuated between him and LeBron. But I say all this to say, like, right now, Luke has been put into a situation where he has been thrust into the number 2 and he's crushing it in that role, to be very clear. I think if Austin was in the same role, I don't know if he's shooting 63% from the floor, 65, whatever it is, plus 72%, 73% on threes. Like, Luke has been crushing that role, to be clear. But I also would like to see what Austin would look like in that role in this series, because we just have not seen him as a number 2. He has often been, or always been, clearly the third best at best in a playoff context. And right now, for example, if he had been healthy from game 1, he would have been the number 2 and maybe even some stretches the number 1. And we would have gotten a better sense of where he was at in terms of that role. I don't think we have a clear idea of where he's at as a potential number 2 yet. I think we've seen it as a number 3, and there's been some mixed results. I think it's been better than people have indicated, but there's obviously been some rough stretches, and including last postseason. But I also think it's like, you got to see what he looks like as a number 2 to really make that judgment. And that to me was the unfortunate thing with what happened with his injury, was just like, he had a golden opportunity with Luka going down to show, hey, I could help put the team on my back and I can lead the offense with LeBron against a playoff opponent. He has not had that opportunity yet. He will potentially have it as soon as game 3. I think more likely game 4. But I also think there's like the framing sometimes of the playoff conversation with Austin, I think, is a little disingenuous in terms of people acting like he was like the number 1 option and only scored 23 points. It's like, no, actually 23 points as multiple times as a playoff high for a number 3 option, I think is actually impressive. Like, most number 3 options do not score 23 points. There's a reason why the Lakers just set this record with the first trio to average 20 points and 5 assists. First team to have 3 guys do that. Like, it's unique, the situation that they're in. But I am curious to see what that looks like. If Austin is like physically right but doesn't perform well, then we'll have that conversation, and I'm happy to have it. But I don't think it's. I think people are kind of rewriting some of the history with him there. Colby, thank you for the super chat. When you made the video after AR's injury and said the Lakers season effectively died today, it really stung, and I agreed with you that the season was over. Now look where we are. What a turnaround. Yeah, I was completely wrong on that. Now, I think the only thing that I would say that did kind of swing the season still in a potentially negative way was like LA dropped to 4, which to me put a ceiling on their playoff ceiling in terms of, I just don't see a realistic way that they beat OKC. And so, I mean, it's just unfortunate that I think the other path, if they had not gotten injured, or at least one of the 2, and they somehow kept the 3 seed, I think they could have had a competitive series and potentially beaten Minnesota. I mean, I think ideally they would have had Luka for that series, but let's just say they beat Minnesota. Then San Antonio now. We'll see what happens with Wemby and his situation, but that's also a team that we've seen not play like their best basketball necessarily to start the playoffs, at least in game 2, even before Wemby went out. So I felt like there was more upside on the other path to at least making the conference finals, where this path, it felt like even if they found a way to beat Houston, which they are currently doing, there is a ceiling of like, okay, well, now they're playing the best team in the league, best defense in the league, and a team that's kicked their ass 3 times already. So that's where some of my optimism starts to wane in terms of like the next round and like the current path they're on. But no, the season very much is still alive. I was completely wrong on that. And I thought that, I mean, look, it's a long series. I know we're acting as if the Lakers are going to win, and every sign is indicating that the Lakers are going to win, but I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse here, right? Like the Lakers still have to take care of business, win the series, and close things out. But assuming they do that, the series, I mean, the season's very much still alive. They are in a strong position to go to round 2, and that was not the vibe 3 weeks ago. And to be quite frank, that was not like the Lakers' own vibe. We saw Dallas was a really tough game for them. Then they play OKC again, and like they start that stretch 0-2, but then they rallied, won the final 3 games, and have now won 5 in a row, and are playing some of the best basketball. I mean, definitely, I would say the last 2 games have been the best defense they played all season, which is saying something. So, yeah, it's been quite the turnaround. Pinty, give AR the Mikal Bridges contract, but 5 years. So the Mikal Bridges contract, I don't know, remember it off the top of my head. 4-year, 150. So that's about a little under. So we're at 33, 36, 38, 41. So then if you added, I mean, the thing that I tried to explain with Austin's contract, people look at the average annual value, but if he's getting around that 200 million mark, then he is actually kind of getting something along the lines of the Mikal Bridges contract, because typically contracts ascend by 8% per season. So actually, I've already done the math on it, but if he had the exact same contract as Mikal Bridges, just with the extra year, he'd be making, so it was 150, 40 years, 150 million. He'd be making about 44, 45 in that last year. So it actually ended up being basically 5 years, 195 million. So, I mean, that's less than 5 years, 205 million, but it's not less by a lot. So I think at that point, if you're paying him 195, it's not a big difference to pay him 200 or 205. You know, I guess there's an optics end from the Lakers side of like, you didn't pay him 200. And then from Austin's side, you got the 200. But the irony with this comment is that Mikal Bridges' contract is very similar to what Austin would be getting if he gets a 5-year, $200 million contract. It's almost exactly the same. Like we're talking about a few $1 million difference. And then Pinty follows up, AR 41.4, 38, 36, 36, 34 would be fair for both sides. So I'm going to do some quick math here. Bust out the calculator. Let's see what this totals up to. So that's 185.4. So that's less than the Mikal Bridges. I mean, this is not exactly the Mikal Bridges contract, just to be clear, because Mikal Bridges went 33 or nearly, basically 33 and a half, 36, nearly 39, 41 and a half. So in this case, you'd be right there with the 34 and the 36 starting out, but then you keep that additional year a little bit lower with another 36. I mean, you could argue for something like this. I think he's going to get more, but we will know in 2.5 months, right? Like there is an expiration date on this, but I think he's crossing the $200 million threshold. Intel is wild. Thank you for the super chat. Please, basketball gods, sign and trade Reaves ASAP. I mean, it just depends what you're trading him for. I think, one thing that I've talked about with the Lakers collective guys a little bit is sometimes I feel like I think some of the contract stuff with Austin is fair. If you think he should be signed and traded, you can make arguments for that. If you don't think he's a true number 2 or even have questions of him as a number 3, I think those are all totally valid. I think sometimes the line with like the Austin criticism gets moved so far to being like, well, he doesn't even belong in the NBA. He should go play overseas. And then I feel like I find myself having to defend him against like some of the more ridiculous claims against him. And then it kind of puts me in a spot where I constantly have to defend him. But I have said I'm still not like fully decided on the Luka Austin duo. I think Austin showed a lot of signs of growth this season. I think people are discounting, like even with some of the performances that Luke and Marcus have had, like I remember Austin dropping 51 and I remember Austin dropping 44 and I remember Austin having 27 and 16 assists and hitting a game-winning shot. Like I think people have, there's certainly been some lows, and OKC, San Antonio, some of the Houston, whatever. He's definitely had some lows against some really good teams, and I don't think that should be overlooked. But I also think people that don't like Austin for whatever reason conveniently leave out the highs of the season, and highs that not a lot of players can reach, if we're being honest. So that's where I think that the Austin discourse just gets muddied a bit. But if you can come up with a reasonable sign and trade, then I mean, I'm not the decision maker here, but like I would be open to it for a reasonable price, a reasonable trade. But yeah, I mean, I think there's, I mean, they played really well with Luka and Austin. The net rating was great. The net rating was really good last year. I think there have been some signs that those two can coexist. We unfortunately have not been able to see it again in a playoff context. Maybe we will in the second round. But if you come up with a great Reaves trade, like I'm not opposed to it. I just think it has to make sense. Pinty asks, is the declining contract for AR allowed? Yes, it is allowed. But to the point of your original suggestion, it would be starting out then likely at the max, which for him is about 41.5, and then declining from there. So it could be something along the lines of what you pitched. I think it would probably, like, I don't know if they'd go like 36. You pitch 41.5, 38, 36, 36, 34. I could see it maybe being like 41, 40 or 39, like a slightly kind of increased middle numbers a little bit, but something like that could work. And then Jazz Singh, McHale is flaming out. Is he a potential buy low guy? Could be, but the thing, so I think some changes are going to come to New York. If New York loses in the first round, after James Dolan said earlier in the season they should win the championship, he didn't even say they should get to the finals. He said they should win the championship. Like, it's one thing, all right, we got to win the East. I picked New York to make the finals before the season. I have since changed that to Boston going into the playoffs, but I was very high on the Knicks. Also not really high on the rest of the East, but I thought the Knicks were the surest bet. And if they lose in round one to this Atlanta team, like, it's a good young team. They're on the rise. They're ascending. But this is, on paper, the Knicks should win this series. And if the Knicks lose in round one, I think a lot of things are in play in terms of, I mean, do they search for a new coach again, or think now some heads have to roll in terms of also the players and maybe making is Cat available, is McHale available? There's going to be some fall guy here that they tried to move on from. Now, the thing with McHale, as we just laid out with his contract, starting next year, 33.5, and then it ascends from there. 33.5, you could technically fit into the Lakers cap space. Maybe you send out, I mean, you put Vando in the trade to get off the Vando contract, and you attach a pick for that. And then maybe it's like a pick for McHale and a pick to get off Vando, and it's two picks or something like that. Or maybe because you're taking on the contract, New York gives you something. It depends how you negotiate that. But yeah, I think he could be a gettable guy. I just also think his performance has not been very encouraging. Like, I don't know. If you look at his couple of seasons here in New York, I mean, this year shot the ball better from three, shot the ball worse from two, but the scoring dipped. I mean, most of the production was kind of there, but I just don't think he's the same level of impact player he was when he signed the contract, or the same level of defender. I think he slipped a little bit on that end. Maybe that comes back. I mean, to be clear, I would entertain it and I would like it. I just think it comes down to the price and how you make that work. Because if you're just trading for the 33 or $33.5 million, that is a big chunk of your cap space immediately gone. And then now you got to figure out what's happening with LeBron, what's happening with Marcus, Luke, etc. Rui. Colby, Thank you for the super chat. Luka's made a finals and Western Conference finals with players similar to AR starting at guard. It could work with the right roster. AR isn't at his ceiling either, in my opinion. Agree. I don't. I have no. I mean, I've made that point before that Austin is in the same mold as Kyrie and Jalen Brunson in Dallas. I think he's better than the Dallas version of Jalen Brunson. Obviously, Jalen Brunson went to a different level when he went to New York, but. Yeah, I mean, we've seen like there's a proof of concept, and the Lakers are pretty good this year. I know there's some doom and gloom in the middle of the season, and that there was some disappointment to end the season with Luka and AR being out. But Lakers were a game back of being the 3 seed. They should have been the 3 seed if they had better health, and they won 53 games, back-to-back 51 seasons. Like this was a pretty good team, and we're seeing it even now, even without Luka and Austin, still a pretty good team. So. We'll see if we get. I don't know. I mean, maybe we see some off. Like, who knows? Maybe Luka comes back and they have a 6 or 7 game series against OKC and they ultimately lose. But it's a very competitive showing, much more competitive than the regular season, and we feel much better about Luka and Austin, about the Lakers in general, about the big 3 together, and like I think that's the most optimistic scenario probably right now. But I would agree. I think Austin will continue. He's gotten better every season. I think he'll get better next year. I don't think he's at his ceiling right now. And you don't have to sell me on Austin. Like I more so earlier was just, I think I'm not saying Austin's perfect, and I'm not saying there aren't scenarios in which it would make sense to build a different roster. I just think it's got to be grounded in reality. And a lot of times I feel like it's not. MJ says that why can't people understand Luka needs a strong defensive guard next to him? He recruited Smart for a reason. I think he does, but I think it depends on the roster you build, right? So that's also where if you go with like a defensive liability in the front court, then it puts more onus on having a strong defender in the back court next to Luka. But like with Dallas, for example, I mean, Kyrie could defend when push came to shove, and I think he's a better playoff defender than regular season defender, but he still had size limitations there, just in terms of like height and weight and strength and whatnot. But when you have a Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford behind you flanking the defense, and then Luka's obviously 6'7", 6'8", that gives you a certain amount of size, athleticism, rebounding, and it gives you a strong defensive core. And we're seeing the Lakers are a better defense than, they were 20th in defense for the regular season. I don't know if they'll continue to defend at a top 4 level in the playoffs, but up to this point, they've been lights out defensively through the first couple of games. So I think they've shown a higher ceiling and floor than maybe we anticipated, at least based on the regular season. Like they did have the great March, but outside of the March, they were not only a bottom 10 defense, they were closer to like a bottom 5 defense. So they really struggled outside of that month and like a little bit earlier in the season. But now they're showing like when it really matters, they can lock in and defend at a certain level. But I mean, sure, I think this is where for me, when we talk about the best, like it would ideally be some sort of like you need the rim protecting big. I think you also need a rangy forward who can defend multiple positions and be a shooting threat. And then you also need a strong defensive guard, but ideally someone with a certain amount of size, maybe someone in that like 6'4" to 6'6" range that can fluctuate between multiple positions. Like someone who could guard 1 through 3, maybe even 3.5, like guard some 4s. That to me is like the perfect player to, and Marcus fits that to a degree, but obviously age, injury concerns, shooting inconsistency. You'd like someone, I think, younger, healthier, better shooter. But there is a reason why Luka recruited Marcus, and Marcus has been a steal on that $5 million. Ashik says, be for real. We're playing the Rockets clogged toilet offense. Our defense is fool's gold. So I would say there's certainly an element of Houston's offense is making the Lakers defense look better. And I think if they were playing OKC, Minnesota, Denver, etc., they would not be the 4th best defense in the playoffs. But I want to give the Lakers credit here. Like I did an interview earlier today. I was asked about this and how much of this is the Lakers defense and JJ and the game planning versus the weaknesses of Ime Udoka, Kevin Durant, etc. And I believe in leading with the positivity here because, like, yes, Houston is playing into the Lakers' advantage in some regards, and they are making it easier for the Lakers to play this style of defense, but doubling is like, there's a reason why teams don't double as much as the Lakers are doubling in this series, because it's tiring. You have to make all these rotations. You have to make the right reads defensively, and it requires a lot of energy. And the fact that the Lakers are running this style of defense and executing at such a high level is a testament to the coaching staff, the game planning, the attention to detail, the awareness. You're seeing guys like Rui and DA, who are inconsistent motor defenders throughout the regular season, lock in and play some of their best defense of the season. So I want to be fair here to the Lakers. Like, yes, Houston's making them look better. Ime Udoka and KD and their decision makers are playing into LA's hands, but LA's also playing good defense. If anything, we could say, like, I think the offense has kind of been a little bit in the mud and not quite been where it needs to be. And like, it's such a slow paced game, and Houston's dominating the possession game, where LA's shooting well. They're shooting 49% on threes, but I mean, they've taken 66 shots and 72 shots. Both of those numbers are far too low. You want to be at least in the high 70s to low 80s. So they're not getting a lot of shooting opportunities. They're making the most of it, but I think like that's the final thing for them. If they can either get more shooting opportunities, win the possession game more, and get just more opportunities on goal, I think that's where the offense could break through and be even better. But I would say, like, their offense is ranked 5th right now, which is actually crazy because it's such a low scoring that I don't really agree with their offense. I don't think they'd be the 5th best offense, but that's what offensive rating, that's where they rank, and they're 4th in defense. So the defense, I would say, has been better than the offense. And then final one here, I'm going to wrap on this one. Jazz_Sing, thank you for the super chat. Don't want to give up Rui, Luke Smart, as they're all playoff risers. Hard to find those. They should try to get better with Vando, Jake, Connect, and the picks. Yeah, I mean, to me, Marcus is a no-brainer. He's been their 4th best player on the season and has been the most impactful player from a defensive perspective and on-off perspective, and just a culture setter, a tone setter for them. Luke, I think it was more price dependent until we saw what he looked like and what he could do scaled into higher usage post Luka and Austin going out. Now, I think there's still an open-ended question of just when those guys return, the pecking order is going to go back to what it was. So is Luke potentially marginalized and not really optimized in that role? I don't know. I think the Lakers should try to keep this going and feature Luke as much as they possibly can. But the way the offense functioned previously, and the way I think it will either function as early as round 2 or potentially next season, it's still going to be a steady dose of Luka first and foremost, then Austin or LeBron, depending on if LeBron's back, depending on how they want to structure things, but and then the other player as like the third guy. That's a lot of usage across those 3 guys, and there was inconsistent opportunities for the Ruiz, the DAs, the Lukes, etc. So with Marcus taking on some more usage, Rui taking on some more usage, and then of course Luke taking on more usage, I don't know how they negotiate all that, but they'll have to figure that out. But yeah, Luke to me is hit must keep territory as well. And then Rui is not quite must keep territory for me, but I would like to keep him. I think it just depends on the contract. I would want to pay him less than he was making this year. If he's willing to get somewhere in that like 12 to 15 range, I'm open to keeping him. If he wants as much money or more than he was making this year, I don't think, at least in the current hierarchy and setup of the team, he is producing at that level. So that one I think is a little trickier depending on the contract that he wants. But yeah, I mean, ideally you keep all 3 of those, you keep LeBron, and you still have some additional moves to make, additional cap space to bring in another player or 2. Like I know the vibes are high, and I know there's a lot of optimism right now, but I don't. So the earlier point about the Lakers defense and Houston making the Lakers defense look better, I don't want to put all my eggs in the basket of like how the Lakers look in this series. I think a big indicator for me would be how the Lakers look against OKC and who like if because I don't think, for example, Rui played well against OKC in the regular season. If Rui turns into a pumpkin against OKC, that changes how I view Rui. Like, you know, he was able to play at a certain level against Houston, but to get through the West in the future, you're going to need to get through OKC. If Rui can't hang against OKC, that changes how I potentially view him and his contract. Similar thing with Luke, similar thing with Marcus, and going to be a similar thing with Austin. Well, we'll see how he fares against OKC, but I think with those three in particular, I mean, Marcus, again, I think he's in a must keep, and Luke is basically there as well. But I do think depending on how some of the guys that the Lakers have to make decisions on play against OKC, if the Lakers advance, assuming they advance, that would be a big indicator to me of like who fits, who doesn't, who should they keep, who should they move on from. Because if you can't play in that series, if you can't hang in that series, then I think it's fair to question if you could hang in future series, right? But yeah, I mean, in terms of the thing with Vando, Jake, and Dalton and the picks is especially with the Vando contract, I think you're just going to have to attach a pick just for Vando. I don't think adding Dalton in offsets that. I don't think people are going to use the second half performance Dalton had against Utah as reason to take on the Vando contract. So you know, you're gonna have to attach a pick and maybe something else just to get off those three, or at least to get off Vando, and that then just limits what else you can offer, right? Because if the going price for a guy is like 2 picks, let's just say, and you need to get off a pick with Vando, that's your 3 picks that they're all gone, and the Lakers have to weigh if that price is potentially worth it. But I agree with the premise that like it would be great to keep those 3 guys. Keep Austin, keep Jackson, keep LeBron, add to it, and flip some of these guys. But I also think it's still somewhat open-ended based on the rest of the playoffs. And like, for example, I'm not projecting this to happen, but like, let's just say the Lakers blow this series and lose in 6 or 7. At that point, I mean, maybe those guys are all great over the course of the next 4 to 5 games. But if they lost the series, theoretically, some of these guys would not be performing well. So that would change how you potentially view it. Similar thing, if they go to OKC and they get swept or lose in 5, if some of these guys don't perform, then you have to reevaluate it. But as things stand, with the current information we have, yes, I think Rui, Luke, Marcus would love to have all of them back, would love to bring back most of the group to a degree, and then make some changes. I think they need a new starting center. I think they ideally need a new starting wing that could slot Marcus off the bench and sort of reduce his minutes and make him be able to play more throughout the season and just kind of save him for the playoffs. But if they do those 2 things, it kind of restructure the bench a little bit. I think they're in great shape going to next season. And then a final one here from Rando. Think of the super chat. Does Luke solve our depth problem? Give more minutes or given more minutes? Yes and no. I think he solves, like, I fielded so many questions throughout the course of the season about should the Lakers sign Cam Thomas? Should they trade for CJ McCollum? I said no to both. I went 1 for 2. I would say the Cam Thomas one aged well, the CJ McCollum one, hey, maybe they could have used him off the bench. But obviously Luke Kennard was a much cheaper player, and he's given CJ level production in the first couple games of the season. So I think he solved some of the guard problems that the Lakers had, because there was a time earlier in the season, especially when they had Gabe, but even post Gabe, where there's just not a lot of guys you trusted handling the ball. If we knew Luke had this in him, which I mean, might have only been like Luke and JJ who knew he had like this in him, I think there would have been obviously more optimism with the Lakers post Luka and post Austin. It's just that was not, where things were at. But I mean, Luke has been incredible. Like I cannot sing his praises enough. I mean, some of the stuff he's doing looks like Steph Curry out there. Like to be completely honest, like that kind of like fake dribble handoff into the twirl into the three. That was very Steph-esque, and just maybe 5 shooters in the league could do that exact move. Like he's just is a special shooter and a special offensive player. I think he helps a lot with the depth issues, and especially if the Lakers can add 1 to 2 more, like at least one new starter and another solid bench guy. If you go into next year and you have, let's say it's a new center, big 3 and Marcus, and then off the bench you have Luke and Rui, and maybe you move off Jake and Vando, but you have Jackson and like another player, and that's your top 9. I think that's a pretty strong top 9. And I think that's a team that can compete with OKC and San Antonio. I'm not saying they'd be favored. I'm not saying they'd even be on their level necessarily, but I think they could have a pretty competitive showing and make a potential 7-game series with those two teams very interesting. But going to wrap here. I'll be back tomorrow after game 3, 5 p.m. Pacific time tip. I'm obviously not there. I am in LA right now, not making the trip to Houston. Might go if there's a game 6. I don't think there's going to be a game 6, but might go if that happens. And then considering traveling to OKC if the Lakers advance to round 2, I think that would be a fun playoff trip. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all for rocking with me late on a Thursday night, off night for the Lakers. But I wanted to talk through game 2 rewatch, game 3 adjustments, and really excited for tomorrow. And we'll see if Austin plays. We'll see if KD plays. Those are 2 big X factors in terms of the game. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. Talk to you all soon.